are just joining us, we are here today for the ICISP Professional Development Seminar on financial aid and transcripting for international classes. We thank you all today for joining us. The format of today's presentation is going to be pretty informal. So first we're going to have some individuals from Elgin Community College presenting on financial aid. And at the end of that presentation, we will take questions directly related to that presentation. If you have questions, I'd ask that you jot them down just during the presentation, and then we'll have ample time at the end to answer any questions that you may have about financial aid and the specific model that we're going to go over today that we use at Elgin Community College. And then what we're going to do is we're going to move into transcripting presentation and international coursework presented by Sue Kirby at College of DuPage. And we'll take the similar format with her. So once she is done presenting, we will go ahead and have some time for questions at the end of her presentation, okay? If you are not talking, I would ask that you mute your mic just so that we can eliminate any background noise. Thank you very much. I see a couple folks doing that. And again, this is running from 12 to 1:30, and we do anticipate being done by 1:30, okay? So we are going to get started because we have a lot of information to cover. And I'm going to see if this works. Hold on one second. Okay, can everyone see my screen? Perfect.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, Lauren, before you begin, are you planning to record this session?
The session is being recorded.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And Natalie, can you still see the waiting room?
Yeah, I found it.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to get started today with our the first portion of our professional development workshop. And this is financial aid rules for use and establishing a process, part of our study abroad logistics ideas for efficiency and simplicity. My name is Lauren Nielsen. I am the Director of International Education and Programs at Elgin Community College. And I'm joined today by my colleagues, Mary Crow and Samantha D'Alessandro. Sorry, Samantha. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves as well. I've been in the field for 17 years, 13 years at Elgin Community College. And for ICISP, I serve as the Carlo Ireland Program Coordinator and the Past Presidential Advisor.
Hello, everyone. Hi, everyone. I'm Mary Crow. I'm the Director of Financial Aid and Scholarships at Elgin Community College. I have worked at the college for the past 12 years, and almost the past 2 years, I have been the director.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Samantha D'Alessandro. I'm a financial aid advisor at Elgin Community College, and I'm also the school's veteran certifying official for the GI Bill. I've been at the school a little over 7 years in financial aid and financial services, with 6 of those years being specifically in veteran education benefits. And I have my bachelor's of arts from Northern Illinois University.
And I do want to just note that on the flyer, it did note that Amy Perrin, who's our Managing Director of Student Financial Services, was supposed to be a part of this presentation. Unfortunately, she's unable to be here today, so Mary and Samantha have graciously agreed to fill in for her. Okay, so the topics that we're going to be covering today: what is financial aid, the different types of financial aid, how students apply for financial aid, including the wonderful FAFSA, financial aid and study abroad regulations. We're going to devote a little bit of time to veteran students and the new regulations that a lot of us have questions about in terms of financial aid. And then we're going to talk specifically about ECC's financial aid and study abroad model and how we implement our process at our institution. And then we'll have time for questions.
Thank you, Lauren. We'll get started. My name is Mary Crow, and I'm going to start with what is financial aid. So basically, financial aid consists of all the funds that the students and families receive to help them pay for college. Included in the financial aid area are the different sources. The federal government is considered, they have special grants that a student applies for through the FAFSA. The Pell Grant is the first one, and that some students are eligible to receive the grant funds for part-time in the summer, fall, and spring. Others, it could be full-time only. So if you do have a part-time where they're going to 6 credit hours or more in a summer program, they could receive the Pell Grant in the summer as well as in the fall and spring. The second grant that is considered when you do your FAFSA is the Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant. And that is we call it the SEOG, or you might have seen it FSEOG. The thing with this is it's limited funds, and it's only offered in the fall and spring. So what happens is the Department of Education gives a pool of money to each school, and then it's up to the school to determine who is going to receive those funds. And I can tell you in the case of ECC, we give those out in the fall and spring. The students receive $250 a semester for fall and spring. And it starts with the neediest of students. And we have a population that we get many that are considered the neediest of students. So it's really important that students, when they're applying for the FAFSA, do that as early as possible to be considered for this grant. In addition to federal grants, there are state government grants. The one for the state of Illinois is the Illinois Monetary Award Program grant, called the MAP grant. And again, that's determined when the student does their FAFSA. It's awarded to eligible students for the fall and spring semesters only. So again, they are not eligible to receive that during the summer months. This specifically goes to tuition and fees, where the Pell Grant can also be used for room and board and other expenses.
Hey, Mary.
And then yes.
Mary, I'm sorry. I'm getting people that are saying they're not seeing the full screen. So bear with me 1 second.
Oh, sure.
On my end, I'm showing it, and because I have a double screen. So hold on 1 second, y'all.
Lauren,
Yeah.
Lauren, it's there it
There
goes.
we go.
There,
All
that's
right. It's because I have 2 screens.
You got it. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, there we go. Thanks. So last year, the state of Illinois passed what they call the RISE Act. And that they produced an application called the Alternative Application for Illinois Financial Aid. And students can go on to the ISAC.org website in order to apply for this particular fund. What it is the Illinois MAP grant. That's those undocumented and some transgender students. Those students are not eligible to apply for the FAFSA. So they can apply under this alternative application. And if they are eligible, they will receive the MAP grant, just like the other students, for the fall and spring semesters only. And in terms of which transgender students would be potentially eligible, when a student does the FAFSA, the Department of Education looks at the student's birth gender. And that, for male transgender students who identify as female, if you're between the ages of 18 and 26, usually a student does this at their senior year in high school, they are required to apply or fill out the information for selective service. And that would be used in a time of war to, select people for the draft. So there's a potential that a student that was born male but now identifies as female, they will not, if they have not done the selective service, they would not be eligible to apply and receive federal grant funds. So that is the particular group of transgender students who can apply for this and might possibly benefit from this grant. Okay. And I also list private entities because, local government. Your school probably gets, as we do, many vouchers from, for example, the Department of Human Services. And then there's others in our area would be like Will County, and that there are special programs where they will provide the student with a voucher to pay for their tuition fees and books. So those could be considered financial aid. And then private entities, and typically when I refer to that, it is scholarships for students from a specific organization. Types of financial aid. So we spoke a little bit about grants, and again, for the first three, Pell, SEOG, and Illinois MAP, those are determined by the FAFSA application, or in the case of the students that I specifically spoke about, the alternative application. Scholarships, please encourage your students, as we do, to apply for all college and study abroad scholarships. There are many that are available to students, and we want to make sure they take advantage. And finally, student loans. Students must apply. I mean, there are other private loans that they could apply for, but by applying for the FAFSA, they could be eligible to receive a federal Stafford loan. In the case of students, they must be enrolled in a minimum of 6 credit hours to take out a loan each semester. So for example, for our summer programs, since those are usually 6 credit hours for study abroad, they are considered eligible for a Stafford loan. And employment opportunities. And obviously students aren't going to be studying abroad and working with the school, but we always encourage our students, if they don't have a job and they'd like to make some money to save for their time abroad, that they could apply for an on-campus job and use those paychecks to set those aside for either maybe paying for their airline ticket or just their spending money when they are on their study abroad. How to apply. For students, the FSA ID has replaced the PIN for those of you that have been around for a while. They go to studentaid.gov. Everything is going through studentaid.gov. That started last year. The student needs to apply for that, and they can use that same FSA ID for 4 years in undergrad and their master's program if they are getting student loans. If they're under the age of 24, they will need a parent to also apply for the FSA ID to sign the FAFSA. So then they will stay on the studentaid.gov once they've done that and apply for the FAFSA online. We strongly recommend that every student possible who has submitted or has done a tax return for the appropriate year to try to link their taxes. Some students are unable to do so because they have certain amended tax returns. So if they're not, we understand. But if they can, it's really important to do so in order to make sure they get the correct information on there. And the final thing I have listed here is institutional financial aid application. That's our one form that every student applying for financial aid, once we get their FAFSA data in, we let them know that they need to complete that. Some students may be responsible for turning in a verification worksheet or other documents. You want to check with your financial aid office. They have to turn in all those forms and documents before we can award them. And it's really important the students understand that, because oftentimes they think that they're done once they've submitted the FAFSA. So when do we start processing? So for students that are coming to school in the fall of 2021 or spring 2022, and in our case, our school starts with our summer semester. So that is summer 2021, fall 2021, or spring 2022, they should have started the FAFSA anytime after October 1st, 2020. So the easiest way for you to remember it is, if you're talking to a senior in high school, they need to apply for, if they're coming to school the following year, they need to apply their senior year on October 1st for the following fall. Now, if they're already attending your school and they're coming back, that would be again, if they want to study abroad next year, that's the FAFSA they should complete. You can also remind them, if they come in the fall saying they're thinking of going in 2022-23, that the new FAFSA will open up on October 1st, 2021. So make sure that they know they're going to have to reapply for the FAFSA in order to receive their financial aid for their study abroad program. And make sure to encourage them to apply as early as possible, because again, the Illinois MAP grant and SEOG grants do tend to run out of funds. So we hate to see them miss out on something they're eligible for. So the financial aid and study abroad regulations, students studying abroad concurrently must remain enrolled at their eligible home school, and the eligible home school awards academic credit for the program of study abroad. So ICISP is the consortial and sponsored programs fall under this category. A written arrangements must be made between the schools, and in this area, it's the member programs that fall into this category.
I'm going to talk a little bit about veterans using the post 9/11 GI Bill and study abroad. So under the post 9/11 GI Bill, which is also called Chapter 33, the VA will pay for the home school's tuition and fees. The students will also receive a book and supplies stipend. This is the same as they would in any other semester. Right now, it's just under about $42 per credit hour with a $1,000 per year cap. And then they'll also receive their standard monthly housing allowance based on the address of the home school that they are attending. It is important to note that in order for the VA to pay any additional fees specific to the study abroad program, the study abroad option must be required for their graduation. Personally, I have only seen programs actually require study abroad for graduation at the graduate level. I don't think I've ever personally seen a program at the undergraduate level that requires it. Unfortunately, this can cause a lot of students to not take part in the program because there could be additional fees that the VA does not cover. It's also important to note that in order for the study abroad classes or program to be certified by the school, in any case, the study abroad has to be counting towards their degree completion in some way. So that in those circumstances, that can be like as an elective. So as long as the study abroad is counting towards their degree completion in some way, it'll cover the tuition and fees. But unless it's actually required for them to graduate, they would not cover any study abroad specific fees. So your standard fees that you would see them pay would still be something like a registration fee or enrollment fee, like they would normally cover. They may cover lab fees or internet fees if they're online classes. But if the fee is specific to study abroad students only, the VA will not cover that unless your program actually requires it without any other alternative as a degree requirement. VA will not pay costs related to travel, such as airfare, lodging, and meals, which is another big reason that I personally have never seen students at our school in my 6 years go through this. Unfortunately, the VA will not cover those kind of costs, and a lot of the students, when they're already getting the bulk of their tuition and fees and stuff covered, aren't going to want to have to come up with money for the other charges or take out loans. So it's not a very popular option that I've seen, just because the VA does not cover all of that cost, at least in the level I've seen. So something we wanted to go over a little bit was some of these new regulations that the VA has put in place for having study abroad programs approved for schools. I became aware in fall of 2020 when we were going through our state approving agencies program approvals for this current academic year, that the regulations had changed, which was something we hadn't gotten any very specific direction about. So I've been consulting with our state approving agent that takes care of this for our school. He's provided me some information about what is required. Basically, in order for a school's study abroad program to be GI Bill certifiable or approved for GI Bill benefits, the school must either own, rent, or lease property at the foreign school in question, or have a contract with VA-approved foreign schools. From what I understand, this means that every school that every foreign school that the home school works with for study abroad must be approved by the VA for GI Bill benefits. There is a website, it's called WEAMS, that the VA uses to list all of their VA approved schools, whether they're US schools or in other countries. So if the school in question that you use as a host school or study abroad school is not VA approved for GI Bill study, then it would not be approved for study abroad, and your overall study abroad program would not be approved by the VA for GI Bill benefits. This makes it extremely difficult to get programs approved. When I spoke with our state approving agent last fall, he indicated that to that date, up to date in that cycle, he had not approved one study abroad program or consortium agreement for any Illinois college that he had worked with. I don't know if that's changed since November of last year, but he said it was the new regulations made it very difficult for any programs to be approved. When it comes to the consortium or contract agreements that schools have with the foreign schools, that's where he did not provide a lot of information about what needed to be in those contracts or consortiums in order for them to be approved. Your best resource, if you have questions about whether or not your program is approved for study abroad or will be in the future, would be your school's veteran certifying official, often called a school certifying official, or SCO. So I would encourage you, if you have questions about your specific program, to reach out to the person responsible for doing the GI Bill at your school to see if you would be approved for the next year. They should be working with their respective state approving agent to, see if the regulations fit the program. And down at the bottom of the screen, you'll also see a link just to a fact sheet about different fee payment scenarios, because every school seems to structure their study abroad fees and charges a little bit differently. So depending on how you structure your tuition charges, fee charges, things like that, there are different scenarios laid out as to what would be covered for yourselves and what the veteran would receive as far as their benefits go. So now I wasn't sure if I read this. Lauren, will everybody be getting a copy of this PowerPoint?
Sorry, technology.
Okay.
Yes, we will email, we can email a copy of the PowerPoints to all the registrants, but also what we'll do is we'll send it to Karen and she can post it on the ICISP members only page.
Okay, fantastic. So everyone should have access to this link in the future if you do want to check out the fact sheet and see kind of if your school, the way your school structures its tuition and fees or study abroad fees kind of fits into any of those scenarios, and it lays it out in good detail. So yeah, if anyone has any questions, I believe Lauren said we'd be holding those to the end, so please keep those in mind for me.
Thanks, Samantha.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about our specific financial aid and study abroad model at ECC and how we, this isn't a fancy term, but it's the term that we use with students. We talk to students about floating them. And so this is kind of how we float students between the time that they apply for a study abroad program until the time of departure and when fees are actually due, which we all know can be a couple of months before departure. So the way that our student cycle of study abroad and financial aid works at ECC is it always starts with a student. A student expresses interest in study abroad. They meet with a study abroad advisor in the International Education and Programs Office. And as part of that discussion, if they say they want to do financial aid or use financial aid towards their study abroad program, we refer them to financial aid. And then from there, the cycle continues to student accounts and then back to the International Education and Programs Office, where there is quite a bit of follow through both with internal offices and the student. So specifically, this is what we do. When a student expresses interest in studying abroad, the very first stop is the International Education and Programs Office. We cover all the standard things that you would in a pre-advising appointment for a potential study abroad student, including cost, location, accessibility, and financial aid. If a student says, yes, I am planning to use financial aid, which we consider anything above and beyond personal funds, so grants, scholarships, or loans, we have a conversation with them at that point about the overall process and the forms that they will need to complete. We have a form at our institution called the Financial Aid and Certification Form, and I have the example at the end of the presentation. And this form is really the signatory form that authorizes the student to have financial aid applied to their study abroad program if it's pending and processing with the financial aid office. We accept a financial aid certification signed by the director of financial aid or a certain financial aid advisor. That is given to a student at the very first appointment, the very first pre-advising appointment. And we refer them to the financial aid office then to make an appointment with Mary Crow, and Mary Crow will meet with them to discuss their eligibility. Are they eligible for financial, are they even eligible for financial aid? Have they completed the FAFSA? If they haven't completed the FAFSA, you know, what steps need to be taken to ensure that the proper paperwork is on file. The student then completes the financial aid process and meets with Mary Crow to complete that financial aid certification and payment form. There are two sections on this financial aid certification and payment form. At the very top is the student certification, and the student lists what program they're going to and all of the anticipated expenses that they will incur as part of that study abroad program. And this is where cost sheets come into play and why they're so important to have even estimated costs for like flights and airfare or passport or things along those lines, because those directly impact how much the student is going to be eligible for in terms of financial aid. So on the top of that form, the student completes that financial aid certification. And then after they've met with our financial aid office and have completed all those necessary steps to make sure that they have pending financial aid into the system and that we've certified, the financial aid office has certified that yes, this financial aid will be processed and will be dispersed at a later date. So let's say a student was going to study abroad in spring of 21, that disbursement date is likely not going to be until late January or early February, which is well after the student would have departed. The student then brings that financial aid certification and payment form to the study abroad office, and the financial aid office communicates with both student accounts and the international office to let us know that this has been certified and that the student is anticipating financial aid for their study abroad program. Once a student is accepted to a study abroad program, we apply what we call the program fee to the student's account. Now at ECC, program fees are considered tuition and fees, which eliminates a lot of the problems that we may have in getting financial aid to cover study abroad fees. I'm seeing that if there's things in the chat, unfortunately, I can't see them just because of the way this is set up. So we'll address those at the end, or if somebody wants to answer that for me, that would be great. Once the student has pending financial aid confirmed, there is communication, a lot of communication on what we call the back end between our office and the student accounts office to ensure proper processing. We apply the program fee to the student account using a special form called a special payment form for the student. And we have a process set up with student accounts whereby that form contains what is called an AR code, which is an accounts receivable code. So every study abroad program has an accounts receivable code, which is then tied to what we call a trust and agency fund. The student accounts will apply the financial aid funding through the trust and agency fund until the financial aid is processed and posted. Okay, so basically what that looks like is when we post the program fee to the student's account, the AR code links the fee to the specific trust and agency fund. And then when the financial aid posts, the trust and agency fund is then reimbursed. So that's where that floating comes in, right? Basically what we're doing is we're not fronting the student money per se, because we know that the student is going to have financial aid that comes in. We never certify financial aid or complete a financial aid certification form until all of our institutional aid application and paperwork is on file from the student and the student has been accepted into the program. Now, a trust and agency fund used to be called a 10 account. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why that has changed. But a trust and agency fund is simply where an entity like ECC holds assets for an agency, such as ICISP. We then deposit those assets into our checking account, record it on a general ledger account specifically for that organization or that club, and then we'll pay the invoices on behalf of that agency using the funds that the agency has deposited. We do encourage students to apply for an early release of their excess loan funds. So let's say their study abroad program fees are $5,000 and they qualify for $7,000 in financial aid. They would then have excess loan funds of $2,000 that they could apply to additional costs on their study abroad program. We also have a very good advocacy program at our institution where students are encouraged to set up direct deposit so that those funds will be automatically deposited into their accounts. In cases where students are unbankable or for whatever reason they don't want to set up direct deposit, I have those conversations with students to ensure we understand if they do or do not have direct deposit during a secondary advising appointment. And if they do have excess funds and they don't have direct deposit, then we do let the student know that it is going to be issued by check, and they'll have to make appropriate arrangements to make sure that check is deposited. So then what happens is, the student leaves, they go on their study abroad program. The funds from the trust and agency account are earmarked for that student's program and paid out of the trust and agency fund. So for example, let's say a student was going to Costa Rica and the trust and agency fund was credited with, I think the amount, Sue, is what, $3,100 or somewhere around there. So let's say it was $3,100 for Costa Rica, pre-COVID. And the trust and agency fund would be credited once the financial aid posts to the student's account. And then the school is basically credited for funds that we are waiting on. That is our overall process. I do want to give some tips for successful models. It's important that you know your process cycle. So we have extremely good working relationships with our student accounts office, our bursar, our finance office, and of course, our financial aid office. So there is always constant communication going on between the three offices to make sure that we, one, are following up with the student and that the fees and the financial aid are appropriate for the program the student is going on. As I said, communication between offices is essential. Another tip that you may want to know about is the difference between what a trust and agency fund is, which is also known as a flow-through account, and the type 10 account, which we used to use, which is also known as a trust and agency fund, but which is no longer applicable to, I believe, most community colleges, especially Illinois community colleges. And basically what changed is the Governmental Accounting Standards Board Statement number 84. They issued a statement in late 2017 where fiduciary activities, which are called liabilities, so these liability accounts, can no longer be held on a balance sheet alone. We have to report those activities in the financial statements of our institution. So basically what you're doing is you're recording revenue and expense on an income statement for the trust and agency fund and not just recording all that activity in a liability account. So therefore it appears on the balance sheet, and we're required to show all the activities of the college on the balance sheet and the income statement. Now, in a layman's terms, because I am not an accountant, nor do I ever, would I ever want to be an accountant? No offense to those who are accounting. Basically, from a layman's perspective, what this means is that we used to have separate accounts, and we used to call them 10 accounts, and they were strictly liability funds. The money would come in when the financial aid posted, the money would go out. So it would just zero out. There was never a balance that would carry over. For our institutional student programs, sometimes we may have, money left over based on currency evaluation rates and things along those lines, students dropping out, whatnot. The nice thing with these trust and agency funds, these 10 accounts, is that the money would roll over. And so it wasn't part of what we call our education fund, our O1 accounts, which I believe is a standard throughout most Illinois community colleges. And so now that they've taken away these 10 accounts, it's still a trust and agency fund. It just falls under the education fund now, because we have to have those liabilities and the revenue and all of the expense activity accounted for on the balance sheet. So I had a little bit of a tough time understanding this when it first came out, because when I look at as a budget officer, when I look at my balance sheet or my budget reports, I'm looking at, all the funds that I have available. And when I see these trust and agency funds come through, I have to make sure that I understand that this is not revenue or money that I can use. These are expenses that are going to be charged to a trust and agency fund. So for all intents and purposes, the trust and agency fund is still a trust and agency fund. It's just the type of account that has changed. And that money still rolls over from year to year as long as it's in a trust and agency fund. One thing that we have done at ECC, which has really streamlined our operations, is make sure that each study abroad program has its own trust and agency fund and AR code. If you have just one trust and agency fund and one AR code tied to it, it can get a little messy, especially if you have a lot of programs going in and out of this one fund. So it just makes it easier for us when we are doing our accounting at the end of the fiscal year to have an account for each individual program. It's important to know that you have a workflow. Students really need to understand what the overall process is. We have a document that we give to students that kind of outlines what the process is, and we found that very helpful so that students understand what each office's role is in the cycle. And then I can't stress this enough, follow up, and follow through. During, right around October 15th or February 15th or May 15th of every year during those study abroad deadlines, Mary Crow and I are constantly communicating and making sure that students' financial aid is good to go. Now, of course, there are always special situations, and I just want to address these real quickly so that you have an understanding of how we address this at ECC. So sometimes a student may be financial aid eligible, but they don't have enough financial aid to cover the full amount of study abroad fees. And so what do we do in those situations? What we do at our institution is, for example, let's say a student is going to Japan and the study abroad fees are $10,000, but the student only has $5,000 in pending financial aid. So there's a difference of $5,000. The student would be required to pay the difference between the program fee and the financial aid that is going to be processed through a trust and agency fund by a week before the due date of the program fee to the host institution or the consortium, okay? So whether that is personal funds or whether that's, private funds from another scholarship, well, a scholarship wouldn't apply, but like a private loan or something that they take out, that money, we make it very clear that the student is responsible for that, and we give them a deadline by which they need to pay that. So far, we have not had any big problems with that because we're very open and transparent with students. If a student elects to take out a private loan, we do discourage students from taking out loans. But the financial aid office, Mary Crow, is very, very good about counseling students on what it means to take out a loan. But if a student elects to take out a private loan, the student has to ensure that those funds are received by our institution by the study abroad payment due date. If the funds are received after the date, the student has to make alternative arrangements to ensure that the study abroad fees are paid in full by the program due date or by the payment due date. And then failure to not pay this may result in dismissal from the program. And the reason we made that procedure is because we have no control over private loans. We have no control over when they're going to be dispersed, who they're going to be dispersed to, so forth and so on. So if a student makes that personal decision to take out a private loan, it's really on them to make sure that, like bullet number 1 on this slide, that those funds are dispersed and they're in their pocket so that the student is meeting that payment due date. We don't allow extensions on payment due dates. These are a little hard to see. This is our study abroad and financial aid certification form. And this form has to be signed by the financial aid office to confirm that the student has pending financial aid. So you'll see up here, the student has to complete this part. And then the financial aid office will certify here how much they have in loans, grants, scholarships, or other, and how much available financial aid is targeted for this student study abroad program. I've embedded these forms into the presentation, so when you get it, you can just double click on it and you'll be able to see the form in a larger format. And then this is our study abroad payment charge form. So when I was talking earlier about AR codes, okay, what we've done is we've listed our most popular study abroad programs here, which are tied to an AR code. So when we submit this to the student accounts office, what we do is we complete this form and we note how much money this should be charged to the student's account, which would be quote unquote their program fee. So for example, in our last example, that student that's going to Japan, it would be $9,500, the 10,000 minus a $500 deposit. And the charges will be added to the student's account, and then the AR code will link it to that trust and agency fund on the back end. Okay, that is the end of our brief overview of financial aid and study abroad and our model at ECC. I'm going to stop sharing this. Okay, now I can see everybody. Okay. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to take a little bit of time for questions. If you have questions, just go ahead and unmute yourself and we'll answer them as best as we can.
I have a question, Natalia Marchenko.
Natalia?
Yes, rather philosophical one. How were you able to convince ECC administration to accept program fees as, or label program fees as tuition and fees? Because this is the resistance I am facing currently at our college.
That's a good question. When I first started at ECC, there wasn't really a process set up for study abroad. And I outlined and made the argument that we needed a financial aid and a study abroad process that would work. And I'm not sure I'm the right person to answer that. I don't know the answer to your question. All I know is that our finance office and our student accounts office in Bursar were able to qualify those program fees as tuition and fees. So when we put the program fee on the student's accounts, it's noted on there as a study abroad program fee, but it's treated like tuition and fees. So it's financial aid eligible.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question, Lauren. Actually, I think this might be for Mary and Samantha. Actually, I have two questions, but the first one is, Samantha, you mentioned for the veterans benefits, this has been a conversation we've been having for a while, that the study abroad has to be a requirement of their degree. Is that the same as saying that each course they take on the study abroad has to be a requirement for their degree? So which way is it, I guess?
Yeah, so basically it has to follow the same kind of guidelines that any class would for GI Bill certification. I cannot certify a class towards a student's GI Bill unless that class is counting towards their overall degree completion. So that can be as some kind of core requirement, or it can be as an elective requirement. So yes, essentially, whatever the classes are, those class numbers, I would have to, and usually personally what I do is I usually work with, we have a designated academic advisor that is dedicated specifically to veterans as well. So any of them, I don't know, kind of off the top of my head, or that I can't find clearly in our catalog to show that it is counting towards that degree, I refer those to our veterans academic advisor and have her confirm that it is counting as some kind of degree requirement or program requirement or elective to fulfill some kind of anything for their degree, essentially. So yes, as far as I'm aware, it would have to count towards their degree in order for it to be certifiable. But Lauren was kind of mentioning the study abroad program specific fees that are built in, that would not be paid by the VA unless there was no way that a student could graduate without doing the study abroad. And again, I've only seen that at the graduate level for international business, master's degrees or PhDs, things like that, or anthropology, where if you have to go, to a different country to do your ethnographies or things like that. So yes, the courses should be GI Bill certifiable if they are counting in some capacity towards that student's degree or certificate completion. But again, any additional study abroad specific fees would not be covered unless they were absolutely required with no other recourse for that degree completion.
Oh, thank you. That helps.
Thank you. Good question.
And Lauren, my second question is for you. What do you do in a case of somebody who receives a Gilman scholarship when that scholarship check is mailed directly to the student and it's going to come close to the departure date of their trip? And it a lot of their, it could be a major amount of money that they're using to pay for their program and they won't have it in hand. What do you do then?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. It depends. So it depends on the timing of that, and it depends on how the student has communicated with us. So if a student receives a Gilman scholarship, our financial aid office has certifying officials, right? So they're going to be certifying that and once we get notification that the student is going to be receiving the Gilman scholarship, we ask them to give that, to pay their program fees with that money. We used to float them, right? So we used to use the process that we have now, whereby the student would, we would float the student and we would use the Gilman as pending quote unquote financial aid. We stopped that practice because we had problems where students were receiving the Gilman scholarship so late or so close to departure or after they departed that there was problems with them actually getting that money to the college in a timely fashion. So now what we do is a lot of those students who qualify for Gilman also qualify for other financial aid. So what we will ask them to do is, we'll certify whatever financial aid is pending, and then they are responsible for finding personal funds or, even a private loan to bridge that gap between the Gilman and the financial aid that is pending. One specific example we had, and this was a couple of years ago, or a number of years ago, is the student departed, the Gilman check arrived, and she couldn't sign it. So it was a big to do. So the check actually had to be, she was like, well, can my mom sign it for me? And I was like, no, your mom can't sign the check for you. That's fraud. So they had to mail the check to the student in the host country. The student had to mail it back to her mom, and then her mom had to deposit it into her account and then pay ECC. And so, I don't think we got those funds until at least a month and a half, 2 months after the student had departed, and it turned into a problematic scenario. So now when students apply for Gilman, we let them know that up front. That's a good question.
Lauren, this is Tammy Tigelaar, and I
Hi,
have
Tammy.
a quick question that sort of follows up, and maybe Sue can help out too. I know in the past we've talked about, we don't have the process in place at Kishwaukee, but we've talked about offering the students the payment plan that we offer to our normal not normal students, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
The students that regularly enrolled students, but sometimes where there is funding issues not coming through right away or whatever, or perhaps parents are helping and it would just be beneficial for them to pay it over a 3-month period instead of all up front. So I'm wondering if there are schools out there that do that and if it's worked successfully for them. It sounds like Elgin does not offer that as an option.
We do not, and the reason for that is we tried it. It did not work. Students weren't meeting payment deadlines, especially for third-party programs. We do payment options for our institutional study abroad programs because we have a little bit more control over that. So we lay that out in our application. Like, for example, if a program fee is $1,000, we'll divide it into two 500 increments, and it's due on this date and this date. And if the problem that you run into with that is that if a student doesn't make that payment, there's a lot of follow-up and a lot of follow-through that takes place, and the college can lose money. And so with ECC is pretty conservative with that in terms of its finances. Just from my own perspective. And so that is not something that we have been able to implement for consortial or third-party programs that we're a part of. But I do think Sue does it, and I think Harper does it as well.
Yeah, I can tell you that we do use our in-house payment plans, and we actually have special payment plans because we have enough field studies and study abroad programs that go in a year. So we have a special payment plan, but the key would be is all of those payments we want to happen on a monthly basis before the student departs. So, start paying off your program in January, February, March, April, because you're departing in May, and anything not covered by financial aid, we want paid up prior to your departure. So okay. It's not a payment plan that runs through the program. It's one that happens before the program in 99% of the cases.
Thank you.
Because the risk would be they would leave and then those last payments would never happen, which has happened to us in the past. So.
Okay. And it looks like in the chat that Catherine said Oakton is offering that as well. So I can chat with her about that, but thank you. I just know from some students that for some students that would be beneficial.
I think we all agree on that point. Natalia?
Yes, thank you. My question is a follow-up to the VA discussion. So as I was listening to Samantha, I was thinking that if VA is covering tuition and fees, well, tuition, right? But the college is labeling program fees as tuition and fees, wouldn't this mean that program cost can be covered through VA then? Or is it different? Go ahead, Samantha.
Well, only certain fees are covered by the VA. So every year that you go through a VA approval, they review the different types of fees that your school charges. So again, common fees that we see each year are things like lab fees, internet fees, the enrollment fee, instructional fees, materials fees, things like that. So every year the VA reviews all the different types of fees that we charge and approves them for VA studies. So when those are certified to the VA, those are covered. However, study abroad specific fees are not approved unless the degree actually requires the student to study abroad in order to graduate. So your standard fees, again, things that are going to be charged to students outside of the study abroad program, should be covered by VA. I've never heard of another type of fee besides study abroad that's not covered. But certain things like at four-year institutions, you may see things like required insurance fees or room and board. Those types of fees are not covered by VA benefits either. So the VA only approves certain specific fees depending on how they're charged by the school.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Yes, thank
so
you.
They basically will ask for the breakdown of what is included in those fees.
Correct. Every year the state approving agency reviews that with the school's certifying official.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Can you talk to the point that you noted the other day about all programs at an institution have to follow a specific line in order to be VA eligible? Like they all have, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so that was what I gathered from after I heard, that we would be having this this presentation, this discussion. I reached back out to our state improving agent that I spoke with last fall in regards to our study abroad approvals, because Lauren and I actually had discussed it at the time. They had sent some new forms that were required that were far over my head. They were all about our study abroad program. So, and several questions that they had about our consortium agreements, who was administering VA benefits, would it be the school or would it be the host school? So they had a slew of questions for us. And based on the information I provided him at the time, he indicated that he did not believe that our program would be approved going forward based on these new regulations. And when I kind of pressed him for the reasons on that, he gave me some new documents. And what I could gather from these documents, again, was that either in order for the program to be approved, your school either needed to be, own some kind of property at the foreign school or be renting or leasing property there, which, doesn't fall under any of our categories, or the schools in question all had to be approved for GI Bill study previously by the VA. So let's say, you had a veteran that was recently released from their service and they wanted to go study overseas in England somewhere. The school that they pick would need to be already approved for VA study in order for them to attend that school with the GI Bill. So the same would go for study abroad. In order for the program to be approved, that school would have to be GI Bill approved, as if the student were just going there on their own without, being in a study abroad program, if they were just enrolling in that foreign school. And from what I gathered from these documents was that unless all of the schools in your study abroad program were GI Bill approved, that the overall program for your school would not be approved. It was kind of an all or nothing kind of thing. Either all of your schools are GI Bill approved and will approve your study abroad program, or not.
Thank you, Samantha. Okay, we're going to wrap up the financial aid portion of this so that we can move to Sue. If there are questions we did not get to, feel free to send me or Mary or Samantha an email. Thank you very much. And Sue, I'm going to turn it over to you.
I should probably unmute. You'd think after all these months we would remember to do that. Hi, everybody. My name is Sue Kirby. I am the coordinator of study abroad at College of DuPage. I am here to talk a little bit about articulation, well, primarily transcription, but really I thought the whole process is important. And I noticed on our participant list, there's a lot of ICISP reps here, but there's also people I don't know. So I'd love this to be a dialogue. So every slide that I put up, I'm happy to have people pop in and tell me what you think and what the processes are at your school. Because what over the years, the 12 years that I've been doing study abroad at COD, I've learned a lot from my colleagues in other schools on better ways to do stuff. So if you hear something that sounds good or that you have another solution for, feel free to pop in and tell us about it. I would appreciate that. So let's see if I can get my slide to go. Okay, so first of all, I think the thing that we all recognize, is that there are lots and lots of options for students out there, and it's really hard for students to figure out which is their best option for them. I know at COD, we tend to start with the ICISP programs because those are the programs that we think are best suited for our community college students. We know a lot about them. We know how the articulations go. We know about the the support that they have on the ground, the like-minded group of students that travel together once they're in country with these students. So really, I always start there, but inevitably, every student that comes in that has already looked into studying abroad comes in with other programs their friends are going to, programs that they've heard about through their siblings, and they're not ICISP programs. The policy at COD is that students can consider any program that is overseen by a US accredited institution or program provider that has a school of record that's a US accredited institution. That's my way to help limit the number of programs a student can look at, because otherwise it's out of control and the students can find 101 different examples of what they want to do. One of the things I talk to students about in looking for programs, if they look at the ICISP programs and they're not the destinations they want, I talk to students about looking at what they think their transfer school is going to be if they have an idea, and going to that school's study abroad website. Because if they have that decision made and they can pick a program that their future transfer school knows about, it could help facilitate that conversation in terms of when they transfer their community college credit. Sometimes those transfer institutions will ask additional questions in evaluating courses. And if they're study abroad courses, if that school's familiar with the study abroad program, it might be easier. Again, if anything pops up in the chat box, somebody just shout it out and let me know, and I can pop in there, and feel free to come off mute if you want. I wondered if everybody in just the chat, just for our future reference, ICISP is always trying to expand our destinations of where we offer, and moving forward, we really want to do that. So if in the chat box, can you just put in the country that comes up the most when you're talking to students recently in terms of where they want to go? And I can tell you my current top country that I hear about is South Korea. I hear about it all the time. So just for our reference, put that country in your chat box so we can see what it is. Okay, so really quick, I'm going to address a couple things that happened before the transcription, and one is course advising. Different schools have different structures on how this happens. At College of DuPage, I tend to do the primary course advising for study abroad, and that's because our advisors and counselors that do the primary course advising for everything else don't necessarily know the intricacies of study abroad courses. We have a good working relationship. They send students to me. That said, I typically then make sure the student takes the courses we've chosen for study abroad back to their advisor and has a conversation with them on how it fits into their bigger picture. And that's really important for that consistency, that persistence and completion. Students are always very concerned. Is this going to set me back? Are these grades going to, or courses going to count for me? That said, it's also very student-led. I'm not forcing students to do that, and I have a conversation of the importance of it is, but it's up to them how much they want to go back and forth with their counseling and advising staff that they work with. The other piece of advising I think is super important that doesn't happen all that much is having them talk to discipline-specific faculty. If they know what their future major is going to be, if they know what pathway they're on, the resources that they can use in the faculty that teach those courses can help them figure out what study abroad courses and programs are best for them. This came up a couple years ago with a student going to Ireland, and the history of Ireland was a class that our ICISP Ireland program offered. And in talking to the history professors, they actually would, the choice was, do I take an American history class or do I take the history of Ireland class? And the history professor said, well, I would rather they take the history of Ireland in Ireland, because that's where you're going to learn the best of that subject matter. So discipline-specific faculty, I think, are often left out a little bit in the conversation of picking classes, but I think they're really important. We are becoming a pathway school. Making sure that your course advising fits with the pathways is really important. And this is a boom for your marketing and promotion of study abroad as well. If you can convince your faculty to include a study abroad option in their pathways, you're going to have students see it and find it and think about it. I don't know if other schools have a database of approved courses. Some do, as some don't, whether it's public and students can see it in advance. A lot of four-year schools, their most popular programs will have a public database so students can see how courses apply. We don't do that at COD. We have a database, but I can tell you that the classes change way too frequently in study abroad programs for that to be up to date. There's a handful of courses that are required especially the ICISP programs, and those we tend to, just know off the top of our head. But I pretty much have classes evaluated every time a student looks at taking it. And of course, they have to have lots of classes because they need the alternative classes as well. So in terms of articulation, the process at COD is rather simple. I collect, and this is not student-led, this is me, and I collect the syllabi and the IAI information from the ICISP member site, or just the syllabi from the program provider if that's the route the student goes. I've posted here the ICISP course inventory log where you can see what we're providing on our website. This is great for ICISP programs, but for non-ICISP programs, I collect the syllabi from the program provider. I submit information in our school, it's directly to the dean, who then probably will turn around and take it to the department chair, that's faculty. Some schools do that differently. Some schools go directly to the faculty first. Some students skip the dean approval in the middle. Some students skip the faculty approval. But at COD, we hit the deans first, the deans distribute to the program faculty, and both of them will sign off on the approved articulation. This is a really important step for the students to make sure that everything works before they go, because all of their classes and the alternative classes should be approved prior to departure. That's really important to make sure that, that their classes last. My deans have said they want to see those syllabi being within 1 or 2 years old at the latest. So oftentimes if you've used a program in the last 5 years, that syllabi that you approved 5 years ago might not be the current one they're using. So we tend to review our courses through articulation processes much quicker than we would by just looking at a database. So I'm a little leery to recommend keeping a big database only because it could essentially be out of date when you're using it. One of the hurdles I've had, and I've had to do a lot of extra research in providing information to faculty and deans, is how contact hours and how classwork is kind of counted and tabulated in other countries. You know, on paper, a class in another country might look like it does not satisfy our contact hour requirements in the Illinois requirements, but yet that's because their method of educating their students is different. More outside work is expected. I think, interestingly enough, with COVID, now that we've all kind of moved to a system of more like hybrid classes where there is a whole lot more expected coursework outside of the classroom that's not actually homework, that might get easier to help deans and faculty see that the actual number of contact hours listed isn't necessarily the thing we should be looking at, but that has been a problem for me in the past. I think, does anybody have, okay, so I'm going to stop right there and just say, if you have anything about either course advising or articulation that you want to throw in here that might be a system that works for you, I would love to hear it right now, because these two pieces are kind of preliminary and important.
So I have a question, Natalia Marchenko.
Sure.
How do you keep your database updated? I'm wondering if it's manual or somehow automated, because the problem I came across is that when our courses change, Some courses are removed, some courses just updated, and maybe the number have changed or the acronym have changed. I'm not always able to keep track of these changes, which creates problems down the road when students actually need to find a course equivalent. So how do you handle that in your?
You know what? That's a good question. And to be completely honest, it's on paper and on an Excel spreadsheet, but it's not the most updated. And that's why I don't rely on that when I'm talking to students beyond the core classes on our study abroad programs for ICISP. I really look individually at each class. I don't publish a database for students to look at, for other advisors to look at, because the minute I do it, it's going to be out of date. So my manner of articulation is case by case in the term of the student that's doing it. I don't go back more than a year or two. So that database, I have classes approved from the 80s on that database, and I can't use that. So to some extent, that database is not something that I find very useful.
I see. Thank you.
Anybody else have any other methods that they either do student advising or articulation that would be interesting for us to hear about? All right, then I'm going to move on. This I'm going to cover just super slowly, or super fast, I mean, scheduling, registration, and monitoring. Just like any other class, obviously we have to do all of these for our classes right now. In our school at College of DuPage, the study abroad coordinator, I am the faculty of record on all the study abroad sections. So I am responsible for 10-day enrollment verification, for any course changes, for pass-fail applications, for midterm grades and verifications, and for final grades and incompletes. One of the questions I have for other people, because this isn't something that I do, although it is something I found that other schools do, is when do you get your records and registrar's office involved in the process? At College of DuPage, that doesn't happen until the end, when I get the transcript and submit the grades. But I'm wondering if there's anybody here as a participant today that uses records and registrars differently, that might include them in the course approval process instead of the transcription process.
Sue, this is Lauren. We used to use a similar process that you outlined with like the Dean of Record approving the courses as needed. A couple years ago, we moved that to our records department just to streamline the process. And for schools that use Eluci and Colleague, we use a specific screen in there called TCEQ to keep track of all of the classes that have been articulated and the individual institution. So we work with our registration records office from that point in terms of articulating courses. But we work with them also if there are course changes, like if a student changes courses in country, and also to record midterm grades.
Interesting. Okay. Does anybody else have another process that they use at their schools?
Hi, Sue. This is Tammy Tiggler from Kishwaukee College. So we also really work from, once the students identify their courses, we also really work with registration from the beginning. So they're registered in the course, and then I do have to fill out normal record keeping and so forth, and it's prompted through them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, the registration process, I think maybe I was saying two things at the same time. Our registration process we do from the beginning, and we handle that and work with registration to do that. It's the registrar process where I came across in my research some schools who actually have the registrar make final approval of the courses before a student studies abroad.
Okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
No, I think I misexplained it. Yeah.
I think our registrar just basically uses the information that we give when they're transcripting.
Yeah, okay. Great, thank you, Tammy. Anybody else have any comments on registration, registrar, or student advising? Does anybody have a unique way that they do student advising through their regular advising? All right, well, we'll think about it and we'll talk about it later. Okay, so one of the things I just wanted to address really quickly is the hurdle of grade conversion. Now, if you go on ICISP programs, you know this isn't an issue because we get our transcripts from ICISP in the US grading system. But I think more of the confusion on grade conversion comes from the student side than it comes from the study abroad organizer side. Because a student comes out of their study abroad program looking at their grades they get and thinking that's the grade that they're going to get, or thinking, you know, that it's going to be posted in a certain way. So what I found is that there's a lot of really good information out there. A lot of us in community colleges are very minimal in how much semester study abroad we do, so we don't all have this knowledge. But my go-to has always been to look at other Illinois state-funded colleges and universities to help me figure out what other schools do in terms of grade conversion. The World Education Services is one of the international transcribing companies that students use when they're international students trying to get their grades converted. They have tons of great resources on their website. You know, I posted, that's a picture of U of I's website that also has really specific programs and how they count the grades. So in order to assure that a student understands going into their program what they might be looking at in terms of grades, I always find it's useful if a student is studying abroad on a program that isn't ICISP, that provides grades as we usually do, that it's really good to sit down with the student before they go and have that conversation about what the grades might look like, so that they, you know, they can understand it. College of DuPage does not use pluses and minuses in our grading system, and so that's been another bone of contention when a student comes back with a B+ and really wants an A- or an A, because a B+ is a B for us and an A- is an A for us. And so we will not negotiate with students on their grades, but I had several students go back to their study abroad faculty abroad in other schools and contest their grades via email once they returned and just explained our grading system. And I've had several students who have gotten B+ changed to A's because they've talked to the faculty abroad about how our grading system doesn't use pluses and minuses. That's up to the student. I don't get involved in that, but it has happened in the past. The other option, the other thing that a little bit that comes up for me is pass fail. I don't know how many of you have had students contact you when they get abroad with programs other than ICISP, where they say, well, all of my friends are taking their classes for pass fail, so why can't I do that? Our policy at COD is all of the classes are taken as graded classes, and those grades will be labeled on their transcript and they will count towards their GPA. But interestingly enough, that is not the case across the nation on how schools do it. And so I threw this together, and this is just from my offhanded research. But what I noticed about all of this information here is that it tends to be the community colleges and the more regional colleges and universities that count grades and count it towards the GPA than the more prestigious universities and big state schools who may not count grades and may not count them towards GPA. And I found that contradiction interesting, specifically because those more, the larger, more prestigious schools tend to still put the study abroad on the transcript, whereas a lot of the smaller places may or may not put it on the transcript. So you have this discrepancy, and we're counting grades in GPA and they're not. And the reason I bring this up is because it matters when a student transfers. So I always tell the student that you can't assume that your transfer school is going to look at study abroad the same way that your community college does. So we do count grades, we do count GPAs, but if you transfer to a private school, they might be evaluating course by course. And they may or may not take pass fail, and they may or may not consider study abroad as a grade that counts versus just a pass fail. So I think it's important, again, for the students to think about what their long-term goals are and understand how those goals are going to fit when they transfer. So at College of DuPage, we put every class on the transcript, and after every class, we notate the country of study abroad. So if a student spent a semester in Spain, after each class they took during that semester, their transcript would be noted study abroad Spain. Study abroad Spain for every single class they took. Some schools just label it at the end of the term. So, you know, after the 4 classes, there would be a note that says semester study abroad in Spain. Does anybody have a unique way of noting this on their transcript, or how many people are out there that actually don't note study abroad on their transcript?
Joliet Junior College does not note study abroad on a transcript, but this is something we would like to start doing. And I'm interested to learn more about different processes various colleges use to have it done, to somehow note study abroad on a transcript.
Yeah, I can tell you, interestingly enough, that ISU does count grades in GPA and doesn't note it on their transcript, but they said it was a technical problem. And so a student has to specially request a special instructions note on the bottom of their transcript to include study abroad. So it's not done automatically. Western Illinois University actually not only notes the study abroad semester, but they list the full school information of the school that they attended abroad. So that's much more information than what we do, which is just note study abroad in the country that the student went to. This was a special discussion we had with our records office about maybe 5 years ago to make sure that it was noted on the student's transcript as an official documentation of study abroad.
So do you note this as a general note on the transcript, or do you label each class that
We label each class because each class has an option to add a comment. So in each comment for each class, it says study abroad and then the country. Does anybody else have any transcription methods that they find useful, or any conversations with their records office that they would like to share?
So Sue, at our institution, we have been told that, and I don't know if this is, I don't know if this is true or not, but we have been told that we are not allowed to change the course title of any courses per ICCB regulations. And so the way that we show that on a class is by the location. So if a student prints out their schedule, it'll show there, but it won't show up on the transcripts. And that is something that we have struggled with over the years.
Oh, interesting. So you don't have that comments option that we have. Yeah. So that is really all that I had to present right now. And I really am, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, because I think what I'd like to do right now is just have a conversation and hear about some of the hurdles and barriers and strategies that you all have for this process that we've outlined here. We've outlined things all the way from, initial student study abroad course choices all the way to transcription and including financial aid. So in the remaining minutes that we have, I think it would be interesting to hear hurdles, barriers, and strategies that you all use and have found as you work with study abroad students. Anyone have anything to add? All right.
Oh,
Yeah.
This is Julie from Wabanzi.
Hi, Julie.
Sorry, I haven't been sharing my screen because I'm trying to eat some lunch. This was really helpful. Thank you so much for putting it together. I've got several colleagues on the call with us, including one from our student accounts, financial aid, and registration and records, because we have spent many hours together powwowing around how to make this process a little more seamless and try to expedite it so that everybody is on the same page. We've created like a flow chart. Oh, I'm hard to hear. Is that better? Sorry, I have this new headset and it's a pain in the butt.
I think the microphone is not working on the headset.
Is this better? Okay. Let me do something else.
We can hear you as long as you speak loud.
Yeah, if you speak directly into the microphone, Julia, and a little bit louder, we can hear you.
Okay, is this better?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just hold it like this. So I don't know if anybody wants to chime in, Krista or Jill, but we created a flow chart to help us determine who to involve when and so forth, including like our testing service, or not, our instructional services for the articulation piece. Because we usually, when we have students, it's just a 1 or 2, it's not very many, and it's sporadic. So we find that we forget from semester to semester or year to year how to best manage this process. So I don't know if people are able to do that, to get together with their student accounts and financial aid, but we've gotten together and just put together a flow chart that's been really helpful.
That's a really good example. If everybody couldn't quite hear that, creating a flow chart with all of the pieces of this puzzle so that everyone who works on it understands where they fall into that place. And I think that would be really useful for the students as well to understand, because even though some of these steps that we've talked about are actually behind the scenes and not necessarily directly with the student, having a flow chart that everyone agreed was the process would be a really good way to help the students see what the process is. You know, we want to make this student centered.
Oh, thanks, Laura.
Very nice, Laura.
So yes, this is what Julie was referring to. So we have a very small but mighty study abroad committee that has put this together. And we're still working through some challenges, but it has really improved our process.
Great, thank you for sharing that.
You bet.
Anyone else have any thoughts on processes?
We too have created a spreadsheet for course articulation, and that's been really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
We have also notated in that spreadsheet which courses students have taken that were already articulated back to the college. So we weren't starting from scratch every time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is a bit time consuming to do that, but it does save time also on the back end when we're trying to articulate that.
Yeah, thank you. I have found that in the articulation of new courses, pre-pandemic, it sometimes was in my best interest to hand walk to the faculty and have a discussion with them as they're looking at the course. And then use that conversation and what the faculty member decides to have that second conversation with the dean for the final sign off. I think sometimes that verbal conversation will help the faculty understand what the study abroad course and program looks like instead of just seeing it through an email. So I think that's very helpful. Any other thoughts on processes and hurdles and barriers? I'm seeing that, let's see, a couple people popped in. South Korea, Japan, Italy, Colombia, Japan. Yeah, Japan and South Korea for me are the most popular. You know, everything has changed with the pandemic, as you all know. I think moving forward, I don't know about the rest of you, but I am seeing a huge interest of students coming forward and asking about study abroad, which is just heartbreaking because at this point we're not, we're very tentatively having discussions about it. But I think there could be an uptick in the interest of study abroad coming out of the pandemic, one, because we've all not traveled anywhere, but also because it really did bring global affairs into more perspective and the interconnection of us all. So, you know, moving forward, I'm hoping we can use this as a launching spot to help students understand why the importance of study abroad in their academic and career plans. Lauren, I think it's time to wrap up.
I think you're right. Thank you, Sue, for a very good presentation. If you could send that to me, that would be great so I can email it to all of the participants. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Again, if you do have questions specific to your institution on any of the topics we shared today, please feel free to reach out to the presenters and we will help you as much as possible. Otherwise, have a great weekend. And if you're an ICISP rep, we'll see you at the next April meeting. Have a great weekend. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.
I understand.